This is Talkback 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309.
This is Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. KGVO, Missoula's news and weather station.
Hey, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Monday, November 4th edition of Talkback. This first hour of Talkback is a best of, so we're not taking any calls for this hour. However, in the 9 o'clock hour, Rob Natelson from the Independence Institute will be joining us live on the phone. So be aware of that. Talkback this morning brought to you by Phillips Janitorial, residential and commercial cleaning for your home and your business. No job too big or small for Phillips. 406-260-6617. Y West Storage is out at the Y on Two Smokes Way if you need storage. And who doesn't? Call 406-510-0590 because at Y West we're making room for you. 123 Seamless Gutters is family owned and operated. They do everything with gutters, so you don't have to. Call 406-240-2669, protecting the foundation of your future. And by Harrington Surgical Supply, where appointments are preferred for mastectomy fittings and custom compressions, but walk-ins are always welcome.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
Now it's time for a best of Talkback for this hour. Okay, welcome everybody. Good to have you along this morning. Nick Christensen is off today, so I will be handling the producer chores as well as the hosting chores. I will try to put both sides of my brain together and see if that will work. Joining me here in the studio this morning, Bob Seidenschwartz. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Peter.
Good to see you, sir.
And I thought maybe an appropriate, you put some songs on occasionally for something that is, what's happening. So listen to the rhythm of the
pouring rain.
Or is it falling rain?
The Cascades.
I was wondering who the group was. Cascades, falling rain, very
telling
appropriate.
me just what a fool I've been.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we are so old.
Well, and there's, let's face it, our audience isn't exactly under 25 here,
I know
that song. Hey, we're waiting for our guest, Peter Stark. This is a continuation of what we started last week. We're going to continue the conversation in terms of...
And we're going to get some real educating done here today.
Well, you and I both here.
Yeah.
And I want to thank Peter so much when he comes in here, of course. But this guy, he's a writer. He is a very busy man, adventurer. Even when he's working out, he's got the headphones on and he's listening to a podcast. So the guy's always doing something. I spoke to him last night, so I know he's going to be showing up here any minute.
Yeah.
A little disheveled, his coffee in hand and ready to roll. But what we started to do and will continue is really to look at where our country was in its earliest origins, the challenges, the issues that were arising, what was happening at that time, the economic, political, and social situation, and drawing parallels to what we see today. So, I'm looking for folks that are going to participate, call in. Let me know if you had this type of education, if this was part of what you were exposed to.
Yeah. And by the way, this priceless education that you're going to be getting today from a gentleman who's quite literally done all the research, Peter Stark.
Thousands and thousands of hours of research.
And has written some amazing books.
Guess who's maybe calling?
There you go. All right. This is absolutely free to you folks today. So I'm hoping that you will be... He's downstairs waiting? Okay.
He's locked outside. He can't figure out how to open the door. But usually really smart people... That's a challenge.
Run, Bob, run.
I'm going.
I tell you, we're going to take our little commercial break just a little bit early, and we'll get a breathless, because trust me, we have a lot of stairs to climb in this building. We're going to get a breathless Peter Stark and Bob Seidenschwartz back and get started with this special edition of the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio with Bob Seidenschwartz and adventure historian Peter Stark with part 2 of some early American history, and you're going to learn a lot of stuff today, so I would advise you to take notes. There'll be no test, but you should take notes anyway. We're going to come right back, hopefully with Peter Stark and your phone calls and Bob Seidenschwartz when we return to Talk Back right after this.
Dennis Bragg with your latest weather. Morning rain and snow showers start the week, turning to all rain in the afternoon today as we warm into the mid-40s. Tuesday promises much of the same with snow early as we start out just below freezing, turning to mixed rain and snow. Not much accumulation expected, although we might see up to half an inch in the valleys, a few inches at the higher elevations and passes before the latest system moves on Tuesday night. It will turn colder following that, lows down to 20 on Wednesday morning with fog and then some sunshine.
We now return to a best of Talkback. No phone calls this hour, please. All right, we are back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Welcome back to Talkback. And, of course, we want to welcome Bob Seidenschwartz, the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio, and adventure historian Peter Stark, who's still getting unpacked. We just let him in, and if you know anything about the layout of our studios here, we do everything we can to put everything as far away from the studios as possible, and that includes the printer, the restrooms, and the front door.
Yep.
So,
yep, it's a place of great inconvenience, but. Wonderful people, wonderful people,
okay, right.
An opportunity
but it's
for
worth it. You
conversation with our audience.
It's worth it.
Yes.
All right. So welcome, everybody. Gentlemen, it's good to have you back. It's like you were just here.
I know. I've just been camping out in my adventure tent in the
That's
front
right.
lobby.
And I'm thrilled to have him back because, we had a great conversation last week and we were just kind of scratching the surface. And we know as we age, our ability to collectively recall and remember starts to fade rather quickly. So having you back gives us recollections to the past conversation as well as what we're going to talk about today. So what I'd like to do first is thank you for taking your time to join us for 2 hours. That is not a small chunk out of a guy's busy day.
I actually thought that last time you were here, you were jetting off to outer Mongolia or someplace like that. Then you had to jet right back again. But
yeah, yeah. Well, I've been there.
Okay, I know you have. Yeah, because we had the other gentleman talking about that.
No, I haven't been to Mongolia.
Well, you know what I mean.
I've been to Manchuria.
Oh, there you go. Pretty close.
But not last week.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so let us continue, gentlemen. By the way, the phone lines are open. If you have a question or a comment as we go on, and I'm sure you will, if you're a dedicated listener to Talkback, especially when Peter Stark is here, you've got your pen in hand and your note paper and are ready to go with questions, give us a call at 721-1290. There's one right now. Bob, go ahead.
So we're going to go back and just kind of do just an overview of what we discussed previously, kind of leading into this week. But I got an assignment for our listeners out there. So you can Google this, which is what we couldn't do in the 1950s and 60s when we were just kids in school. No. So for those of you out there that have the computer, I want you to look up Hamiltonianism. Oh boy, Hamiltonianism. Help me out here, guys. Hamiltonianism.
Yes.
Thank you.
Like the play Hamilton with a Hamiltonianism.
It is
with an
early,
ISM on there. At
What
least.
you have to do is put a Hamiltonianism.
And some Jacksonianism. Some Jeffersonianism. So yeah, I got to stop this right now. So look up Jacksonianism, Jeffersonianism, and Madisonianism.
Madisonianism.
Thank you. Jeez. If you guys can get past that, you're going to do a lot better than me this morning.
Heavenly days. And believe it or not, we already have a caller on the line.
Well, and
I hope the caller knows how to spell those
or
words.
at least
for us.
pronounce this.
There will be a test when we're all done to spell all this stuff.
Yep.
But Nancy is on the line. I'm going to go ahead and get her on. All right, Nancy, good morning. You are on with our guests. So let's get things started, ma'am. What's on your mind?
Well, good morning, glory historians and patriots. Our country's founding was turbulent, and I feel that this turbulence is expanded into today's time because we are going through an extraordinarily divided time. And to make matters worse, social media is fueling extremism and misinformation, and it's helping to divide us politically. And I am extremely worried about the downfall of the United States. I do not want to see this. We do not deserve what we're getting today. And let's look at the debates. It was a rigged debate because obviously Disney owns ABC network, and Disney also introduced Kamala Harris to her husband Doug, and it was biased. So I got nothing from the debate at all except anger. And I'm going to tell you this much. I have decided that in November of this year, I'm voting for my country because I do not want a progressive Marxist in our White House. I don't want to see the...
Well, can I ask you, what's your question?
States. Yeah.
Do you have a question for Peter?
For Peter, how can we stop the divisions to other spots? Extremism and misinformation by the social media and outside influences like the Chinese and
So,
Russian.
Nancy, there's an awful lot that you're putting on our plate right now, so let's kind of deconstruct that just for a minute, because you initially started talking about how contentious things are, and one of the purposefulness of our conversation that we started last week and we're going to continue is to really try to educate and draw parallels in terms of what was happening very early on in our country and where we are today. And what you would find when you're talking about disinformation, well, you have cable and the news outlets and X and everything that we have today. It really wasn't much different 250 years ago. You had coffee shops. You had newspapers that, for those who could read, first of all, were also controlled and very much tools of a specific viewpoint or ideology. Political party. So if we start thinking about it in that fashion and take a deep breath, the world's not going to come to an end. The country's not going to go away. Have another cup of coffee, Nancy. It's going to be okay.
Nancy, thanks for the call.
But there's definitely parallels, and what we're here to do is what I just stated. So, Peter, let's go back, because Nancy gave us a perfect introduction to the conversation that we're going to have. So thank you for that, Nancy.
That's why we wanted to have this conversation.
Here's where we are now.
Yeah.
How did we get here?
Yes.
And what maybe is different?
Okay, Bob, I want you to answer that in 25 words or less.
Okay, go ahead. Starting with 1796.
Right.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No.
Okay.
It's for you.
I was passing this off. Okay. We can go back a bit about what we talked about last week, a week ago Thursday, and we had a really great 2-hour conversation here, and we had so many good calls come in, as we went on, and we basically tried to trace back the partisan divide to where it started during the founding years of our country, and that was the partisan divide. It really started in mid 1790s. And it had to do, the two parties that split out were what we're now calling the Federalists or the Hamiltonians and the
Jeffersonians.
And the Jeffersonians. Or you can call them the Democratic Republicans to get confused. The Jeffersonians.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So, but just think of Jefferson and Hamilton. Hamilton, to put it in 20 words, favored a strong central federal government, and Jefferson favored states' rights much more strongly, and was a big champion of the little guy farmer. And Hamilton said, but we got to make this whole thing work. So how are we going to raise money? How are we going to have like a centralized system for anything without a strong federal government? So that essentially, the what we've just been hearing in the debate and from Nancy's call, we're in many ways talking about the same thing. It's the same tension runs through our partisan debate today as it did then. And it's not just a nasty divide. It's a real philosophical question about and practical question about how do you make this country work, and it's always a balancing act between those two, the federal and the state.
We're gonna take a break. Come right back. 721-1290. We'd love to have you be a part of the conversation, like Nancy was. If you have a question or a comment, we're digging into history and finding out cool stuff, basically. So we're going to come right. Of course, that's a radio term, I guess. Anyway, we're coming right back. The phone lines are open at 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309. Back after this. This is a Best of Talkback. No phone calls this hour, please. And now back to a Best of Talkback. No phone calls, please. 1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Phone lines are open for the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. Bob Seidenschwartz right over there. Joining us here in the studio, adventure historian Peter Stark. We're just scratching the surface here on the dynamics, which continue with over 300 million people. Back when the country was in its infancy, we still had those dynamics.
That's right. And I was going to read just a brief paragraph on just Jeffersonian democracy, as Peter had alluded to. Named after his advocate, Thomas Jefferson was one of two dominant political outlooks and movements in the United States from the 1790s to 1820s. The Jeffersonians were deeply committed to American republicanism. So we have to define what does that mean, which meant opposition to what they considered to be artificial aristocracy, opposition to corruption, and insistence on virtue, with a priority for the yeoman farmer, planters, and the plain folk. They were agnostic to the aristocratic elitism of merchants, bankers, and manufacturers, interestingly distrusted factory workers, and strongly opposed and were on the watch for supporters of the Westminster system, which I'm taking is probably alluding to the British Empire.
The British Empire.
Right.
There was a great fear of the British Empire, any king, any royalty, any single authoritarian head of state.
Any monarchist.
That's what I'm looking for.
Thank you.
And, any monarchist just jumping in there because they just kicked out the King George a few years earlier, and so there was this great fear that the whole system would reappear, the monarchy.
So if you take some of those concerns and what was evolving at that time, fast forward today, whether the criticism is justified or not, that's some of the criticism that you hear about another Trump presidency, which is, what would that do to the system? What would that do to the institutions? What would be attempted? So this is part of the tension, Peter, that you were alluding to earlier, that take what happened back then, fast forward to today, and truly, again, what's different. But let's go back to these earlier times and what you, through your research, were actually identifying and seeing with the different factions that existed, and maybe give us some insight as to what maybe were some of the motivations behind some of the ideology, because we had landowners. And at that time, Jefferson gives suffrage to states. I think Vermont was one, and I don't know if it was Virginia, wanted to give the right of white males to vote, which was also not at that time.
Without property.
Without property, exactly. So an important concept of you have to be a property owner in order to be able to vote.
You had to be a white male property owner.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was universally true, to the best of my knowledge, when this country was founded in every state. And then over the coming decades, there were some movement to say, well, you don't really have to be a property owner. You just need to be a white male.
Right.
And then that suffrage, that ability to vote or the right to vote, spread slowly from there. And so in the beginning, that you could think of the voters were they were a party of interest. The party of interest being we're probably educated, we have land, and we're white male, and we're considered essentially the patriarchs. And so the political system was geared to that interest group.
Right.
And, in a way, we've been dealing with kind of counterbalance to that single interest group ever since then for 250 years.
Is this all pre-Constitution?
No, this is
post-Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But the reason I'm asking is because with the rules that you're stating that only adult male and white landowners were allowed to vote, that doesn't sound very constitutional to me. So,
I mean, that's why this is so important to talk about, is because this country was an experiment, as we know, to begin with, and it's been a work in progress ever since, and it's been a serious work, real work as it is today, to figure this out, and it's almost like a improvisation for 200 and what are we on now? 200 and almost 50 years.
Tell you what, we're up against a break here, and Elena is waiting to visit with you. And by the way, all of our other phone lines are open. We're talking with adventure historian Peter Stark. Bob Seidenschwartz here with us, the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. We'll be back. I'd like to get those phone lines lit up. I'm playing producer because Nick's not in today. We'll be back right after this. Again, this is a best of talk back. No phone calls, please.
As you gather with
Dennis Bragg with your latest weather. Morning rain and snow showers start the week, turning to all rain in the afternoon today as we warm into the mid-40s. Tuesday promises much of the same with snow early as we start out just below freezing, turning to mixed rain and snow. Not much accumulation expected, although we might see up to half an inch in the valleys, a few inches at the higher elevations and passes before the latest system moves on Tuesday night. It will turn colder following that, lows down to 20 on Wednesday morning with fog and then some sunshine.
And now back to a best of Talkback. No phone calls this hour, please. Okay, we are back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. 1-800-568-5309. Bob Seidenschwartz here in the studio with us, along with adventure historian Peter Stark, and Elena is on the line right now. Elena, good morning, ma'am. Hold on. All right. There we go. Hi, Elena. You're on. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You. Okay. I love the Constitution. Let's go back to the predecessor of the Constitution, and that was the Articles of Confederation.
Good.
Hamilton.
Go for it.
A few other dudes, right?
Yeah.
And I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Elena.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so, those that are familiar with the Articles, they wanted a weak central government. And then, of course, you had your Hamilton and Madison, and the battle continued. And so, hence, we did a redo. And they introduced the 9th and 10th Amendments, the famous 10th Amendment. That's important. Both of these are important. And you can read them. I was going to read them. They're very short. But
I'd say read them if they're short. I'm curious.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll be glad to. Okay, Article 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. 10. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people, not the federal government. The whole idea of the Constitution and the way it was set up was to limit the powers of the federal government, and the federal government really doesn't have any direct contact with any of the individuals in the United States, and it's a union of individual states. So here's my question. What we have now, isn't it a problem because all the federal regulatory agencies that don't represent us, the states, or the individuals, but represent the executive branch, are violating our rights with their grants, their suggestions, and aren't they the ones that are introducing more government, federal, and less liberty and rights for the people?
That's a great question, and you based it very well in history. Thank you very much. And I'd love to kick this around a little bit. And that's a really important point that anything that is not explicitly given to the federal government in the Constitution, or it's not specifically mentioned in the Constitution, remains with the people. And as I recall, that's the same with the Montana Constitution. And I'm not a constitutional expert at all, so thank you for illuminating those. I know the amendments, but I couldn't have told you the numbers of them. That those are very important amendments. Since then there have been a number of amendments more, and that deal with others of these tensions. the issue that came up almost immediately post-Constitution was, how do you actually make this a working entity? How do you make the states work together in a way that's a smoothly working unit as a national presence on the global stage, basically, which was the aim. And so one of the first things that came up post-Constitution, in my understanding, is, okay, we got this grand experiment going. Okay, who's going to pay for this? And that was like the first thing that comes up, and nobody wants to pay. I mean, really, it's no different from today.
We're reporting it. How about you? How about you? How about you?
Yeah. I mean, we've got this great idea, man.
Well, you're rich. Why don't you pay for it?
Exactly. And so it's exactly the same tension that we have today. So then the Hamilton was the big proponent of saying, well, we need a central bank in order to make this union work as an economically viable entity. And each state's its own entity is part of the idea, and the Union of States is also an entity. But the experiment ongoing is, how do you balance those two, the big federal and the union, and each individual state, which has its own autonomy in a certain way. And so finances were right at the heart of that. And I just want to bring up one point that always comes to my mind when people say, well, why, we got the federal government, we got regulatory agencies, and those are all, what you brought up, really legitimate questions, and we're really talking about those a lot in this election, and I think deservedly so. How has that quote unquote regulatory state or bureaucracy got into sort of an overreach mode, and it's really hard to rein back. On the other hand, I always think about, why is there this federal regulatory apparatus? And I can tell you right now, there would be no Interstate 90 running through the state of Montana if there were not.
Right.
There would be the school districts would look wildly different, and there would be a much more uneven educational disparity in this country. The interstate commerce would be a complete nightmare, because every state would be tariffing every apple across the state line.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So there are very good reasons why there's a federal regulatory apparatus, but it's also just what Elena, the point she raises is like, what's too much? How do you keep that balance?
Right. And that's where elections come in.
And that's and debate, and the debate that we're having.
And I will tell you, while you were talking about this, a phrase popped into my mind. Citizenship to me means access. If I'm a citizen, that means I have access to the people who are elected over me. I have the ability. I'm a citizen, so I can go to the mayor. I can go to the county commissioners. I can go to one of my state legislators, and I can say, look, I'm a citizen of this state. I'm a citizen of this city, and this is my opinion. And I go to the city council meeting, the county commissioners meetings, and because of my citizenship, I have access for them to listen to me. Now that may be narrow, but I'm just thinking, why don't we use it?
I mean, that's what a great point. Why don't we use it more?
Yeah.
I mean, people do use it, but it could be used a lot more, and especially when people are angry and have grievances, and be part of the political system. I mean, engage with it. Rather than, what's somebody's phrase, don't complain about it, do something.
Yeah, and by the way, by access, I mean vote.
And number one, vote.
Yeah. Because anybody can walk into a city council meeting and voice an opinion. But when it comes to deciding who's going to be on that city council or who's going to be in that county commission, I have a very precious power. I have the vote.
And local elections, when you think of that, the votes are the percentage of people who vote It's kind of sadly low.
It's dismal. Anyway, we're up against a break, so we're going to come right back. By the way, I'm going to shut up and let you guys talk. 721-1290 is our number. 1-800-568-5309. All the phone lines are open. If you have a question or a comment for Peter Stark, our adventure historian, and Bob Seidenschwartz, give us a call. We'll be right back. No phone calls right now, please. This is a best of Talk Back.
Call 123 Seamless.
Need to replace your Social Security card? In most states, you can request one online with a My Social Security account. A My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal earnings history and benefit status. You can also get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
And now back to a best of Talkback. No phone calls this hour, please. Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Calls are starting to come in. Adventure historian Peter Stark is Bob Seidenschwartz guest today. And we're going to get to those calls here in just a minute. But Bob, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, as we're having this conversation, I want our listeners to just kind of visually think about, these aren't just paragraphs from a book of a bygone era. Try to put yourself in the place of these people in 1796 or 1820. This is living, breathing individuals and families. Regions are developing. People are coming into the country. We don't have a large population at that point. We now have 330 million people spread across the United States. So you've got to put perspective into the conversations that we're having, and also understanding of what were people's lives and minds like at that point in time as well. In some cases, probably not very different. They were concerned about the same issues we are today. A good job, security, future for our kids, but it looked a little bit different based on who can participate in that future for your kids too.
Okay, we're going to get Mark on the line. Let's do that right now. Good morning, Mark. You're on Talkback with our guests. What's on your mind, sir?
Good morning, gentlemen. So I wanted to follow up on the 10th Amendment discussion. That's it's been one of my pet peeves. It enumerates the responsibilities and rights of the federal government and delegates those that are not delegated to the federal government to the states and to the people. Well, when Roosevelt was, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on names here.
We talking Franklin or Teddy?
FDR?
FDR. Was in the 30s trying to do the New Deal. There was parts of the legislature that were suing the government, saying that those rights were delegated to the states, and it was illegal for the federal government to get involved in some of those things that he wanted to do. And the Supreme Court took up some of those cases and finally got tired of it and just said, we are not accepting any more cases trying to enumerate the 10th Amendment and what the federal government can and can't do. And they've just, since the 30s, have refused to take cases like that. So there is no place at this point in time for somebody to sue the federal government saying those rights are delegated back to the states and you have no right being involved in that. And it's just a point of contention as to how the Supreme Court can just decide that they're not going to enforce an amendment to the Constitution. And I don't know if you know anything about that. I've talked about it with Rob Natelson a few times, but I thought I'd bring it up. Thank you very much.
Mark, thanks so much. This is not my area of expertise, and I know Rob Natelson has given a lot of thought. I do not know that the Supreme Court said no. We're not going to listen to any cases that have to do with states' rights over federal rights or federal rights over states' rights, because there have been any number of laws that have been passed and any number of cases that have gone to the Supreme Court that deal with exactly that. The Supreme Court maybe has said, okay, we're not taking cases on this 10th Amendment standing. I don't know. This is so far beyond.
It gets very nuanced. It gets very legalities.
But that I think the point that Mark is making is that what are the limits on federal power? And again, that's what we're talking about. Here's the tension that's ongoing. And you look at FDR, and he was a very powerful, persuasive president and got a whole lot done. And it was also, we have to remember the social context of the times where in the depths of the Depression, people are desperate for jobs. And people are, they're literally have no health care. They don't have food. And so FDR is trying to address these problems, and his people and many others, of course. And so as a result of that, we end up with things like Social Security.
Right.
And so, who in the United States, there's another one when I talk about federal versus state power, that without federal regulatory power or federal power, you wouldn't have an I-90 going through Montana right now. You wouldn't have a whole lot of other things. You wouldn't have airports for one, or you wouldn't have a workable airline system in the U.S. But without that what I want to say, that divide, that tension, that pivot point in this era that you're talking about in the 1930s and FDR, that we wouldn't have Social Security,
which is a point of contention today.
Who in the United States, ask anybody who says, well, Social Security, we don't need it. Who says that?
Actually, a few people politically right now are saying that maybe this is a system that has come and past its time. So, Peter, it goes right to the fact that for everyone who says something positive, there's somebody else, maybe it's a small voice, saying, whoa, look what it's doing to us.
All right.
Let's get the caller on the phone.
Elena is back. So, all right, Elena, you are back. Go ahead, please, ma'am.
Okay. You hit it right on the head. It's the election, and it's who you elect to represent you. And it's who is going to take their oath of office very seriously. The legislators, one of which I hope to be in November, it's their job to scrutinize every suggestion, every bill that comes down before them, especially during the interim committee period, which is we're going through right now. So it's up to the legislators to do this for us. And I'll just say, again, going back to Natelson, he said something to me that started me on this road to do research more when I said something about the oath of office. And he said, which one? And I said, what? And that's when he opened up a whole new road, because we've got two. We've got the Constitution as written and approved by the people, and the annotated one. And the annotated one is court precedent, legislation, all that stuff that could be unconstitutional.
Were you talking about the Bill of Rights?
No, I'm talking about the one that's annotated by court decisions, by legislation. The Montana Code annotated this resolution that was passed saying we're going to do this.
You're talking about state laws.
Right, exactly. Thank you. And so who does it come down to? The state legislators, the ones we elect.
Elena, can I, we've got to go to a break. Elena, can you hang with us for a minute? Because I have a question to put to you running for office and the state legislature, but I know we need to get to a break here.
We are up against a break. Also, Catherine is waiting to visit, and we're going to put you on hold there, Elena, and we'll let you come right back. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. We're talking about all sorts of fun stuff here with adventure historian Peter Stark. We're coming right back after this. No phone calls this hour, please, but we will be taking calls for Rob Natelson in the 9 o'clock hour. Boy, do I love... And now back to a best of talkback. No phone calls, please. This is a vigorous political debate. This is great. This is
a
good discussion.
Yes,
and it's going very well, too. Let's get Elena back on the line. Elena, Bob asked you a question during the break.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Look, they're people just like us. You get elected, and some are really take their job very seriously, and some get a little bit kind of lazy and maybe don't do the homework that's required as it reflects representing us. So within the legislature, who's kind of checking to see who's being nice, who's playing and, doing the work that is required as we elected you to do?
Well, that's why it's going to be up to the constituents.
Okay. So we're the checks and balances.
Oh, exactly. And you're going to do that by who you elect.
Right.
And that's why it's important. Make it informed. Don't just get out there and vote. Make it informed. And at this period, with people that are having forums and debates and all that, that's very important. Okay, now I'm running as a libertarian because to me, I'm going to balance the two sides of the opposite coin, the Republicans and the Democrats. Okay, I'm going to be the referee. I hope to be the referee. And Catherine, by the way, I give that woman a lot of credit. She knows what she's talking about, and she brought up, and I hope she talks about it, that the Sustains Act, that blew us away when she brought that up the other day. Yeah. And this is another thing of federal reach into it. And I'm just going to leave everybody with this saying, okay, by George Washington. A government is like fire, a handy servant, but a dangerous master. We'll keep government as a servant, but don't let it get out of control to be a master.
Well said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Elena, that was well said.
Yeah, good,
all right,
good call. Thanks.
Speaking of Catherine, let's get her on. Let's see. We're going to let that go, and we're going to go like this. Okay, I'm acting as producer
Peter,
as well.
You're doing a masterful job. You're handling a lot of
I should stop talking to myself.
Chris is punching buttons all over this room.
Catherine, good morning. We have about 5 minutes before we have our top of the hour break. Go ahead, please.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So thanks, Elena, for that nice thing that you said. I was looking at the New York Times, and there was an opinion piece by a couple of law professors, one from Harvard and the other one from Yale, pretty high-powered people, and they're talking about the Constitution should be overturned and should not be reclaimed. And I sent you a link to that article.
I got it.
And that seems to be a growing opinion that we need to just throw aside tradition and the Constitution and actually the idea of a rule of law over and above legislation. And I was wondering what you thought of that and how that would actually work if something like that actually came apart. I mean, it seems like we're heading in that direction anyway. There's a lot of discarding of the Constitution and the idea of states' rights and the idea of individual rights as opposed to group thinking and group rights, which is, I think, a very dangerous thing. So I was wondering if you wanted to address that, please.
All right, thanks for the call.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very interested in looking at that article. When did it come out?
I just got it right here. Unfortunately, I'd have to buy a subscription to the New York Times to read it.
But,
okay, there you go.
Okay, anyway, but I'll try to dig that one out. And so thanks for that, bringing that up, Catherine.
It's an opinion guest essay.
It's an op-ed piece, and by two, it sounds like law professors at Ivy League institutions. Again, my expertise is way early in our history of our republic, but I do follow politics pretty closely and today. And I really, in my take on politics today, and I follow it closely. I haven't heard a whole lot about people wanting to overthrow the Constitution. I mean, I don't know. Somebody called in the last time I was here saying, the communists in the left wing want to erase the Federalist Papers and whatnot. And I said, I've heard nothing about that. And I think it's just like there's a rumor out there. I mean, I think it's one of these things that gets passed around very quickly.
Don't you love the internet?
Yes. Yeah. And that says, oh, well, there's this whole movement in the United States to get rid of the Constitution. I know that is not true.
I think not.
And that's why I'm interested in this op-ed in the New York Times by these.
All right. And just want to let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to bring to a close this hour of the best of Talkback. featuring Peter Stark, Bob Seidenschwartz. And again, we always appreciate Bob bringing his great guests with him. Now, we are going to transition into a live version of Talkback in the next hour. And our guest on the phone will be Rob Natelson. He is the constitutional scholar with the Independence Institute in Denver. And, of course, with tomorrow being Election Day, I'm sure Rob will have a lot to say. So hopefully your phone calls will make it happen.
This is Talkback, 721-1290 or 1-800-568-5309.
This is Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. KGVO, Missoula's news and weather station.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. And, of course, this is live with our guest, Rob Natelson, joining us on the phone from the Independence Institute in Denver. And Talkback this morning brought to you by Y West Storage out at the Y on Two Smokes Way. Give them a call today to find out if they have a unit for you at 406-510-0590 because they are making room for you. Phillips Janitorial can clean both your home and your business. Your satisfaction always guaranteed. No job too big or small. Call Phillips, 406-260-6617. Harrington Surgical Supply, where you can feel confident in their discreet and knowledgeable guidance on a multitude of products and medical supplies. And also brought to you by 123 Seamless Gutters. Yeah, the rain is going to be turning to snow. You may need some new gutters or gutter guards, so give them a call today, 406-240-2669. That's 123 Seamless Gutters, protecting the foundation of your future.
The views and opinions expressed on Talkback are not those of the staff, management, or advertisers.
Okay, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Good to have you along this morning. It is Talkback for this Monday, November 4th, and we are live. And we are privileged to have with us Rob Natelson from the Independence. I almost called you the Honorable Rob Natelson, but you're honorable anyway. Rob Natelson joining us from the Independence Institute. And Rob, give us a little catch-up on what you've been up to since our last visit.
Well, the important thing is we got our first snowstorm here in the Denver area.
Aha.
It's coming down now. Not very heavily, but at least it's snow, and it seems to be sticking, at least now. Those of us who are skiers look forward to the result. Those of us who are drivers do not.
Yes, exactly. I was just going to put my 2 cents in there. Here in Missoula, it's still cloudy. It's still in the 40s, and so no snow in our forecast for a while.
Yeah, I've been working with the Senate Select Committee on reforming the judiciary a great deal on the drafting of bills, actually more precisely, the research behind bills. They hired me for that job on October 21, basically for a 2-month period to try to prepare measures for the January general session. And in addition to that, in answer to your question of what's going on, tomorrow morning at a website called Law and Liberty, I've got an article coming out on the Electoral College. So tomorrow is Election Day, if we still have Election Day, and it seems appropriate that an article on the Electoral College would come out. One of the things I should say about this article, Peter, is that, a lot that can be said about the Electoral College, both pro and con, already has been said. And there's kind of a feeling that people have that the same things are being said, therefore, over and over and over again. This article is different. What this article does is it examines the Electoral College in the context of the entire presidential system. We actually have a 4-tier presidential system, a presidential election system. And it explains kind of the reasoning behind the role that the Electoral College plays, but you can't really understand that role unless you understand the entire system. And so a lot of the criticism tends to focus on the Electoral College alone while ignoring other components in the mechanism.
Can you tick off what those 4 points are, just maybe a title of each one?
Well, the first step is the step where the electors themselves are chosen. The Constitution says they're chosen in such manner as the state legislature shall determine. As was predicted by the founders, every state legislature has now delegated that task to the people. And so that's where the people vote for presidential electors. And generally speaking, the presidential electors from each state are determined by a plurality vote of the people. So that's stage number one. Stage number two occurs in December, where the electors meet. Now, although we talk about the Electoral College, meaning the Electoral Society, they never meet all together in one place. Electors from each state meet in their own state capital. So Montana's now four electors will meet in Helena, and they'll vote for president. They're supposed to vote by secret ballot. I mean, that's the Constitution says by ballot, which means secret ballot. Over the years, the practice has grown up of revealing how the electors vote, or the electors themselves revealing how they vote. So that's stage two. Stage three is the counting of the electoral ballots, and that occurs in a joint session of Congress held in Washington, D.C., under the chairmanship of the President of the Senate, which in this case would be Vice President Harris. She would supervise the legislative session, the congressional session that counts the votes. Now, the vice president really doesn't have any power in this process. That was a matter that was discussed after the 2020 election. The vice president is just kind of a presiding officer, and can be overruled by a majority of the vote of the joint session of Congress at any time. So out of this process, an electoral count is made, and the results are tallied. If no candidate for president gets a majority of the electoral vote, or if no candidate for vice president gets a majority of the electoral vote, then there are runoff elections. There's a runoff election in the House of Representatives for the president, and a runoff election in the Senate for the vice president. In the House of Representatives, the vote for president is carried out by states. So whichever party has a majority of the delegations in the House of Representatives will elect the president. In the Senate, you also have to have a majority vote, and that is done by senator. And in each case, the quorum has to be 2/3. So you can see that this is an extremely elaborate mechanism with these four separate steps, and it is designed to accomplish a multitude of purposes that the founders adopted, not just, geographic diversity or a few other factors, but a real multitude of factors that people tend to overlook when they argue the merits of the Electoral College.
And with that, we're up against our first break, and we have folks waiting on the line with us. We have Skip and Jerry both standing by, and several other phone lines open. If you have a question or a comment for Rob Natelson, he's live with us from the Independence Institute in Denver, and we'd love to have your calls all the way till 10 o'clock. So we'll be right back after this.
Dennis Bragg with your latest weather. Morning rain and snow showers start the week, turning to all rain in the afternoon today as we warm into the mid-40s. Tuesday promises much of the same with snow early as we start out just below freezing, turning to mixed rain and snow. Not much accumulation expected, although we might see up to half an inch in the valleys, a few inches at the higher elevations and passes before the latest system moves on Tuesday night. It will turn colder following that, lows down to 20 on Wednesday morning with fog and then some sunshine.
We are back on Talkback, and ever so popular is our friend Rob Natelson from the Independence Institute, that our phone lines are already maxing out, and here I am all by my lonesome self. So let's get started here. I believe Skip is first, so let's get him on. All right, Skip, good morning. You're on with Rob Natelson. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Skip.
Thank you, Pete. Good morning, Rob. And I'm sorry you're getting snow in Colorado. We don't allow it here.
I'm not sorry, Skip. I'm not sorry. I'm a skier.
Well, we have a dome up over the Bitterroot. We don't allow it until we decide. So, but meanwhile, I wanted to ask you two specific questions about where we're going in the state of Montana, because I know you keep your thumb on the pulse of that. And these are two general questions. Are we moving towards a time in Montana where we need to figure out if we should have, and how would we get there, to have an appellate court in this state? And the second thing is, are we also looking at a time where because I know people in Helena that are thinking of this, and some legal eagles in the state that really care about the future of this state. Are we moving towards a time where we should, in fact, have another state of Montana constitutional convention like 72? That is where I'm at as to whether we're moving towards that or not, and whether it would be good for us. And thank you, sir, for coming the day before election.
Thanks for the call. Appreciate it, sir. Rob, go ahead, please.
These are really excellent questions. Most states, I think 41, have a court in between their trial court and their highest court. So, for example, Colorado, where I sit right now, has the Colorado Supreme Court, the Colorado District Court, but then in the middle, the Colorado Court of Appeals. But, of course, Colorado has a population now approaching 6 million, far, far more than Montana. Other relatively low population states tend not to have intermediate appellate courts. From what I can figure out, I think probably establishing an appellate court, intermediate appellate court in Montana would be premature. I don't think the workload justifies it. On the other hand, there is a different approach, which is now being explored by some members of the legislature, and that is to establish one or more specialty courts, courts at the trial level that focus on certain specialty areas of the law where the Supreme Court or trial judges may not have the expertise necessary to decide the cases. Montana already has two courts like this. One is the Water Court and one is the Workers' Comp Court, although you can say the Workers' Comp Court is really more of an administrative agency. But it does have the Water Court that deals with the specialized area of water law. But there are other specialized areas that are not always handled well by the Montana court system, such as the review of constitutional questions or the review of complex business matters. And so there has been talk of establishing specialty courts, as, by the way, a number of other states have already done, over half the states have already done, in order to provide a situation where there's better justice at the trial level, and then if the case does go up to the Supreme Court, there's a better record, there are a better set of findings. The second question is whether or not Montana should have a new constitutional convention. I no longer vote in Montana, so I'm not going to dictate that or attempt to the citizens of Montana. But I do believe, and as I've said on this program many times before, that while the Montana Constitution is not perhaps the exemplar of all evil that some people think, neither, on the other hand, is it Holy Writ. That we do have a number of significant problems in the Montana Constitution that are probably best addressed by a constitutional convention, and one that better reflects the current demographic and political makeup of the state rather than the state's demographic and political makeup back in 1972. So I would give a qualified yes. It probably would be a good idea to have a new constitutional convention. I'm not saying the current document needs to be entirely thrown out, but I think some fundamental amendments are in order.
Okay, let's push another button here and get Jerry on the line. So I believe... There we go. Jerry, good morning. You're on with Rob Natelson. Go ahead, please.
Good morning,
Jerry.
gentlemen.
Long time no talk, Jerry. How are you?
Good. I think you're thinking of another Jerry, but it's good to hear from you. But about a month ago, Peter and I got into a conversation about the president declaring martial law, and within the second sentence, we were above my pay grade. Could you talk a little bit? Could you talk a little bit about if the president wanted to close the border and for illegal immigration and declare martial law under the Constitution? What powers does he have? Does Congress have to get involved? Could you talk a little bit about that, please? And Peter, I'll listen offline.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jerry. Thanks for the call. Good question.
Under the Constitution, I'm not talking about statutes here. Under the Constitution, the only martial law the president could declare would be in the theater of war. One of the decisions most criticized that Abraham Lincoln made was suspending the writ of habeas corpus, that is, suspending the right of somebody to a hearing if he was incarcerated. He suspended the writ of habeas corpus in areas of the country that were not part of the war theater. And President Lincoln got slapped down for that by the Supreme Court. So within an actual war theater, he does have the power to declare martial law. Beyond that, his ability to declare martial law would depend upon congressional statute. Now, could he actually close the border? I think probably so. I think that the history of the Trump administration shows he's got very wide power to close the border. Could he, on the other hand, let's say, lock up his political enemies? The answer to that's clearly not. No, there's no statute that authorizes that. And there are, I believe, literally hundreds of emergency statutes out there, and they give the president a great deal of power. I think some of them are not justified by the Constitution. So, yeah, within a limited scope, he could declare martial law, but not over the whole country as to all things. I don't think he has that power.
All right, with that, we're up against a commercial break. We're going to come right back. We have Mr. Wingnut, we have Dave, Jeff, Buck, and Joe, all waiting in line very patiently to talk with Rob Natelson from the Independence Institute in Denver. We'll continue with that conversation coming right up after this.
Montana State News Network.
I'm Dennis Bragg. If the taste of winter weather we got over the weekend wasn't quite as strong as you were expecting, just wait. National Weather Service forecasters in Great Falls are saying periods of strong winds later today into Wednesday could create full-on winter blizzard conditions along the northern Rockies, especially on the front at Marias Pass. Winds are expected to gust over 50 miles per hour with significant snow along the mountains of central and north central Montana Tuesday. 6 to 12 inches of snow could impact travel over the western Montana passes with snow showers and winds across the southern parts of the state. If you're trying to cut expenses to get through another Montana winter, you're likely considering how to get out of some of those subscriptions. That's been tough in the past. But Will Gordon reports the whole process is changing to your advantage.
Canceling a membership just got a lot easier. The Federal Trade Commission just announced a brand new click-to-cancel plan that will help consumers across Montana. Ending a membership can be costly and frustrating for many consumers here in Montana. The FTC in 2025 will require every seller that offers a membership from gyms, streaming services, and more to have a one-click cancel with no loopholes. This means more money in Montana's pockets to spend how they choose. In Bozeman, Will Gordon, Montana News Network.
The Lewis and Clark County Sheriff is investigating the confrontation at a Helena bar over the weekend where a suspect stabbed a Helena police officer and was killed when officers shot the man. Helena PD reports the man had refused to come out of the restroom at Jester's Bar. Officers tried to tase the suspect, but the officer was stabbed while they were trying to restrain him, with the officers firing their guns. They rendered medical aid on the scene, but the man died. Spending for Montana's heated U.S. Senate race appears to be flattening out as the contest comes to a close. OpenSecrets.org reports combined spending by outside interests and the candidates at just under $270 million. But the last week hasn't had the rapid rise in those totals that we were seeing through much of the last month. This is the Montana State News Network.
If I could be you.
And you could be me for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Here's a fun fact for you. The average chameleon can point their eyes in 2 different directions. On the other hand, the average human can't. So unless you're a chameleon, there's absolutely no way you can focus on texting and driving at the same time. So don't do it, unless you're a chameleon.
Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Talk Back. Rob Natelson is our guest from the Independence Institute in Denver. And since our phone lines are almost completely full, I'm not going to waste another moment. We're just going to get another call in. This is, okay. Mr. Wingnut, you're on with Rob. Go ahead, please.
How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm doing fine. This is in regards to the Electoral College, and I was listening to Ben Shapiro's podcast from Friday, and he brought up the situation that in the census of 2020, that there were blue states that were overcounted and that there were red states that were undercounted. And the effect that has is it shifts the number of members of the Electoral College, and in favor of potentially in favor of the Democrats. Even he posits in worst case scenario that there could be a 7-point difference. And so where that comes down, where the bearing is when you have an election as close as this one is, that could be within low single digits, that the results of the 2020 census would have a major effect on the outcome of this election. So that's just asking you to amplify on that or give you thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you for the call, sir. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, if the census overcounts people, let's say in New York, and winds up awarding them more members of Congress, what that means is they'll get more electoral votes. That's because the electoral votes awarded to each state are calculated by all the members of the House of Representatives plus the 2 senators. So if New York, let's say, has 38 representatives and 2 senators that got 40 electoral votes, if due to overcounting they wind up getting 40 or 41 representatives, then they're going to get more electoral votes accordingly. I think that I get the impression, I haven't done a lot of research on this, but I get the impression that the 2020 census was politicized in a way that prior censuses maybe were not, that there were extra efforts to try to scour up larger populations in blue states like New York than in red states like Texas. I don't have a very good solution for that. I think that abolishing the Electoral College for that reason would be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But there's no question that it can be a concern.
All right, let's get another call in. This is Dave. Thank you for holding. You're on with Rob Natelson. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, boy, a lot to talk about. First, about immigration law. I would agree with you. A president has a right to shut down the border in an emergency, and they have done it during that virus thing. But there's laws on the book, and I've studied some of them, and the 1990 law gives some immigrants, some people entering this country, legal rights, and they have fought that out in court and then won. And it's never gone to the Supreme Court, but if it did, and the Supreme Court ruled that people entering the country have some legal rights to come in here, would the president be able to overrule the Supreme Court? And finally, would you accept the results of the election? I mean, if it's whichever way it goes, do you think the election is going to be legal and fair?
I have no idea whether the election will be legal and fair. I certainly hope it will be, but I'm not prepared to say based on something I'm not prepared to predict something as happening which hasn't happened yet. On the issue of whether people entering the country have legal rights, they unquestionably have legal rights. The Constitution says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And there is a requirement that states grant equal protection of the law to persons. So if a person enters the country illegally, he's got some legal rights. He clearly doesn't have as many legal rights as somebody who's here legally. For example, under federal law, he doesn't have the right to vote. But people entering the country illegally simply can't be disposed of like chattels or like garbage because they're still human beings and they have rights. They have rights under the Constitution. Again, they don't have all the rights, however, of American citizens, and they don't have all the rights of people who are aliens but are in the country legally.
They do have a right to due process, obviously, right?
They have a right to due process. Now, the Supreme Court's definition of due process is flexible. For example, due process for whether somebody can be punished in jail is a much more flexible concept than due process for somebody who's not in jail. Due process for somebody who's in the military is more flexible than someone who's not in the military. And if somebody's in the country illegally, It may not be necessary to give the person a full jury trial and, all the rights that citizens have, but there would have to be some minimal right to be heard in one's own defense, maybe a right to counsel, but the hearing could be in a much more summary way than if the person were a citizen or in this country legally.
Again, with that, we're up against another break. We do have some phone lines open now, but we are waiting. We're going to be visiting with Jeff and Buck, Joe and Brad, with Rob Natelson from the Independence Institute in Denver, and really appreciate him taking all these phone calls. We're going to come right back with more of Talk Back right after this. Okay, we are back on Talk Back. 721-1290 is our number. Rob Natelson is taking calls this morning from the Independence Institute in Denver. And let's push this button right here and get Jeff on the line. Jeff, thanks for holding. You're on with Rob Natelson. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Solway, Rob. Solway, Montana.
Solway. Go ahead.
I had a kind of a fundamental disagreement with Peter that I've never actually aired before because it was not of consequence at the time, but that's that Peter is very enthusiastic about everybody getting out to vote. And I view voting more as a privilege than a right. And I really don't want a couch potato bong smoking person out there or a fascist or Marxist who wants to take away my liberty. I really don't want them out there voting. So if they want to stay home, that's perfectly fine with me. And over the weekend, I was listening to the former U.S. Attorney Andy McCarthy on a podcast, and he echoed that same sentiment. And he emphasized that at the founding of the country, the only person that a citizen would vote for at the federal level was their House of Congress or congressman.
Representative.
The senator was appointed by the governor. The president was selected by the Electoral College, and that voting was considered a privilege in that you had to meet some minimum requirements. Now, those were abused over the centuries, Jim Crow laws and stuff. So the necessity for property and the necessity to pay a tax and all those sorts of things have been reduced. But where do you stand on voting, particularly since voting day is tomorrow? I think it's really kind of appropriate to take a look back and see how voting has changed and where do we stand now as opposed to where we stood when the country was founded.
Thanks, Jeff.
Well, the first thing to keep in mind, Jeff, is that Peter Christian is never wrong, ever. So you must always concede.
Yeah, but you must know that I did sell my bong at a garage sale. So, but go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
Secondly, just a minor correction. Senators were not chosen by the governor. Senators were elected by the state legislature. The vote. You're right, though, Jeff. Technically, voting is a privilege, not a right, if you use the Constitution's language. By privilege, we mean an entitlement created by government, as opposed to a natural right. Now, a privilege can be extremely important. I mean, the trial by jury is a privilege rather than a natural right. The right to habeas corpus is described in the Constitution as a privilege. So that doesn't mean it's not important. It's extremely important. But for technical classification purposes, voting is a privilege rather than a right. I tend to agree with you that somebody who has not bothered to inform himself of the issues, has not done that basic homework, probably should not vote. I don't think that's fair to anyone. If you're going to make a decision, in my view, it should be an informed decision.
All right, let's move on. And I believe Buck is next. Let's get that on. Buck, good morning. You are on with Rob Natelson. By the way, some of our phone lines have released, so if you're trying to get through, give us a call at 721-1290. Go ahead, Buck.
Yeah, so you started out with Electoral College, and if you would, Peter, I think I'll get better results doing this piecemeal. Most states, Rob, do they not go all or nothing once the popular vote's in, but the electors generally vote all one way for a given state with a few exceptions?
That's correct. All the states except for Maine and Nebraska elect their electors by a popular plurality, and it's winner take all for the entire state. Maine and Nebraska split it down, however, by congressional district.
How did that? What is the motive? Just to give the state more power? Because in a way, they're ignoring the the will of their people. The Electoral College is just to give somewhat of evenness for the small states like Wyoming, Montana. Let's say Pennsylvania, the toss-up states, it would be closer to the people's will, like in Pennsylvania. I don't know how many they have, but if they have 22 electors, say that 12 go for Trump and then 10 go for Harris. But as you pointed, why is that not so?
I think it is. The idea of the winner-take-all voting is to increase the state's power. And if you think about it, let's say Nebraska. You've got a fairly liberal area in Nebraska, Omaha and Lincoln, okay? And if you split the electoral vote, then very possibly the people in Omaha and Lincoln are going to choose a Democratic elector rather than a Republican elector. But if you look at the entire state of Nebraska, even though their unicameral legislature is technically nonpartisan, it's going to be more Republican. And so you're going to have a Republican legislature, and they're going to try to maximize the benefit of the Republican vote by going winner take all. So it's partly politically driven and desire to increase the power of the state.
Yeah, no great magic. I guess perfectly understandable then. Thank you.
All right, Buck, Thank you for the call. Let's see who's next. I believe it's Joe. Let's get Joe on the line.
Joe, right.
All right. Joe, good morning, sir. You're on Talkback with Rob Natelson. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning.
Why wouldn't the Chevron decision be a perfect match?
Well, we just lost him. The Chevron decision be a perfect match for I'm not sure what, but Joe, if you want to call back.
I'm not sure for what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on then, and let's get Brad on the line. Brad, good morning. You are on with Rob Natelson. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Rob. This is Brad Molnar. How are you doing?
Hi, Brad. How's the race for PSC coming?
Oh, I'm feeling fairly confident. Two real quick points here, I think, because they go to exactly what you've been talking about, which is I think it's extremely beneficial for you to be talking about the function and the things that surround the Electoral College, because people need to understand what it is and how it works before they demagogue it. And the demagoguery has just been horrific, at least it is on this part of the state. The other is you just talked about an informed electorate. And I think one of the big problems to having an informed electorate is the dark money that is framing all of the issues on both sides. To be specific, in the Public Service Commission race over where you are right, or where Missoula is, all the counties that border Idaho, $495,000 of dark money has been amassed under the name of Montana Ratepayers Association. We don't know who's running it. We're not sure where the money is coming from the groups that are putting money in. They are still putting money in. They are still putting services in at no cost with 3 days to go, 2 days to go. So how is it that the average person would know how to vote when all of the information is coming out one-sided because one group can only donate $450 at a time, and the other can draw on unlimited funds from across the nation, having no idea where those funds came from, where or why.
Yeah. Well, Brad, I'm not an election lawyer. I'm a constitutional lawyer, but my understanding is that part of the problem is that the way the campaign finance laws have been structured, that the ability of a candidate to raise money has been reduced. The ability of the parties to support their candidate has been reduced, but you don't see a concomitant reduction in all of the dark money coming in. This exact same thing happened in Colorado a few years ago, and it's what turned Colorado blue. You had this huge amount of unregulated dark money coming in, arguing for leftist causes, and the candidates who were attacked by it couldn't raise money enough because of the impediment of the campaign laws to be able to defend themselves. So I agree with you; it's a huge problem. By the way, if I could say one thing just as a personal experience with Brad Monar, whom I admire greatly? Just to tell a quick story. When I was running for governor in 1996, I gave a speech to a group of veterans in Anaconda. And I thought the speech was absolutely terrific. I mean, it was one of the best things I thought I'd ever done. And it just fell flat. It just fell absolutely flat. It got no particular response at all. And so I said to Brad, I said, why couldn't this great speech get response? So Brad says, well, what did you talk to the veterans about? I said, well, I talked about the great service that American veterans have performed for their country and for the world. And so Brad responded, what you should have done, Rob, is talk to them about hunting and fishing, right? They hear the other stuff all the time, but they would have been more interested in hunting and fishing. I learned a lot from that.
Thank you, Rob, for that quick trip down memory lane. But I think that if we don't, and it'll be a federal issue. We've got Supreme Court rulings. If we don't make all donations transparent and equal in the amounts that can be raised and spent, we are sacrificing everything below the college. If you can buy a State Department for $495,000 and get all your money back in 1 year at the cost to ratepayers, exactly what good is anything else? You've lost. You can lose the department every time for $500,000. You can lose the auditor. You can lose OPI. And yet, even though I've sounded the siren song, I've sent out the press releases. If it weren't for Peterson and people like him, there would be no way for me to get out the message, and there's nobody else willing to carry it. So I thank you for your time, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Thanks,
There's a similar situation, not exactly the same, but similar with the Montana Supreme Court. Montana Supreme Court candidates want to get out their message, and then the trial lawyers and other special interest groups come in with enormous amounts of money, promoting their candidates and attacking candidates who cannot respond. So I'm not prepared necessarily to endorse Brad's specific proposal, but there's no question there's a serious imbalance there that needs to be addressed.
I'll tell you what, we're up against a break. We're going to come right back. We still have, let's see, we lost Joe. We got him back. We have Emmett waiting on the line. Harry's also waiting. So we'll continue with Rob Natelson on Talkback right after this timeout.
Right.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good to have you along. It's Rob Natelson joining us here on Talkback this morning, taking your phone calls, and there have been a lot of them. Unfortunately, I believe Joe got cut off. Wasn't any doing of ours, but Joe, you wanted to finish your point with Rob. Go ahead, please.
No, that was my fault. And there was two questions I have. One is why would not the Chevron decision that the Supreme Court ruled on recently be a perfect match for challenging Mayorkas on the immigration issue as a overreach in terms of interpreting the immigration law, the wide deference stuff, And then the other question I have is we have 126 on the ballot, and Colorado has the same issue. It's ranked voting, and if you could clarify some of that for us, that'd be great, because I think it's confusing. But pretty much anything that comes out of Colorado, I don't trust after that Supreme Court that they did. But that's not a good reason to oppose an issue, But still, Colorado, I mean, come on. Give me a break.
Thank you for the call, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, Joe, as one who is now living in Colorado in exile, I will tell you, you're right. Don't trust anything coming out of Colorado's current political environment. I voted against the ranked choice voting proposal here in Colorado. I think it's basically designed to try to leave us with candidates who don't differ that much. I mean, and if you listen to the official justification for this sort of thing, the argument is, well, politics are too polarized, and what we really need is moderate candidates, in the election against moderate candidates. Well, voting is all about choice. It's choice of policy. If you've got two people who are both moderate, don't differ that much in the issues, then what you're doing is you don't have that much of a choice. Also, I believe that the parties play an important role. I mean, people don't like the word partisan, and they often claim that they don't like political parties, but political parties play a very valuable role in the system, and this sort of voting scheme is a way of trying to reduce their role, and I think that would be unfortunate. The decision that abolished the Chevron doctrine was called Loper-Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, recently decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. And it said that the former practice of the courts in giving deference to an agency's interpretation of its own regulatory statute is going to be abandoned in favor of a court interpreting the statute itself, rather than giving deference or assuming that the agency's interpretation is correct. Could that be used to challenge decisions by Mayorkas? Perhaps. I'm not sure what statutes he's operating under and what decisions that could be challenged, but it may very well be that he's making decisions based upon interpretations of the statute that maybe are not the best interpretation. So there may be specific cases where the Loper-Bright decision could be used as a basis for challenging Mr. Mayorkas' decisions.
Well, Rob, you've been taking calls like a champ, and we still have Harry and Emmett waiting to visit with you. We're up against our final timeout. It's a 1-minute break. We'll come right back. We still have a few phone lines open, and we'll try to squeeze you in if you have a question for Rob Natelson from the Independence Institute. We'll be back in 1 minute.
John Test.
We are back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. All right, I believe Harry's been waiting the longest. Harry, thank you for holding. You're on with Rob. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. Yeah,
hi, Harry.
Yeah, hi. Several points here. First of all, on the choosing, whether like Jeff said, he doesn't think everybody should be able to or should get the right to vote. And I agree. Everybody shouldn't get the right. As long as I get to choose who gets the vote, that's how I'll do it. I tell you who gets the vote, and then that's how
Harry,
it works.
I don't think he was saying that not everybody should have the right to vote. He was saying that voting is a privilege, and if you haven't bothered to inform yourself, maybe you shouldn't vote. So.
Yeah. I don't. Who determines how informed a person should be?
Right, but he's not. But that's up to the person himself. I mean, he's not talking about disenfranchising members of the electorate.
But
so
anyway, also as for the dark money, the Supreme Court they kind of overturned that when they said that money is speech, and so you can complain all you want, but I agree there should be transparency, but that I think the Republican legislature at the time decided that it wasn't a necessary thing. So, and one more thing, what was it? On the Electoral College giving out the idea that it's because of political power, the states should it is states determined, but I think that's the worst reason to do anything is because of it diminishes the partisan power. I think it'd be better if the states let the electoral votes go by percentage. Say Montana, we got 4. You have to have at least above 75 to get all 4. If you get less than that, they only get 3 of them, whatever. That way, people will. A Democrat in Montana, his vote does not matter for the president right now. But then if they did. It would go all across, California. If you are a Republican in California, your vote for the president really doesn't matter because it's a Democrat state, and same with
Harry,
New York.
Harry, I think that makes a lot of.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know that. I'm not prepared to sign on a particular proposal, but you're basically proposing more of a proportional way of allocating electors. I would recommend that tomorrow check out the website Law and Liberty. That and is an ampersand, Law and Liberty, and read read what I have to say about the role of the Electoral College in the larger presidential system. Try to get in the queue early next time in December, and we'll chat. We'll talk about it. As for dark money, I think the Supreme Court's decisions are a little bit confused in this area. First, advertising, in my view, is not freedom of speech; it's freedom of the press. and should be analyzed as freedom of the press instead. The Supreme Court's decisions and the legislation that has been adopted, there's no question that they've skewed the playing field in favor of dark money and against the parties and against the candidates. I'm not sure that trying to fiddle with the playing field more is the answer to it. The answer may simply be for the federal government to get out of that particular business and let candidates and parties and interested individuals spend whatever they want to and let the voters sort it out. Because right now, dark money seems so overwhelming precisely because it's not constrained by the federal and state campaign finance laws, where candidates and parties are constrained. That's a fundamentally unfair situation, in my view. One last point. I mentioned that currently in exile in Colorado. I'm not prepared to go into details here, but we've got some things going on which I hope will enable me to spend a lot more time in Montana with friends and family if these things work out, and I think they will.
We are happy to hear that. All right, Emmett's up next. Emmett, we only have just a few minutes. What's your quick question, please?
Thank you for taking my call. Well, my question is, was it constitutional about 200 years ago or so to forbid people that did not own property from voting? That disenfranchises the poor. And the poor who had two jobs at minimum wage and don't have property have a right to vote and make their voice heard. To me, it's discrimination against the poor. I don't think just because you're poor doesn't mean you're going to necessarily vote liberal or be a pot-smoking fascist. I don't know quite what that was, but there's been a lot of anger against the poor, for the rich, and we need to form a more perfect union. So how about that? I mean, was it legal under the law to disenfranchise people if they didn't have property? I'm glad we don't do that anymore.
All right.
I mean,
thanks for the call, Emmett.
Well, okay. First off, property ownership requirements in the United States, with the exception of a few states like South Carolina, were always very, very modest. I mean, anybody who really wanted to qualify, if he wasn't, an absolute pauper, anyone who wanted to qualify could in most states. At the time, yes, it was constitutional. The states determined the voting restrictions. However, since that time, we've had a constitutional amendment saying that the failure to pay a tax cannot be used as a justification for preventing someone from voting. We have the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution that has been interpreted to prevent discrimination against classes of voters. So it would be much more difficult today for states to impose any kind of property requirement for general elections. However, there are certain kinds of elections where the states still do impose property requirements. They're called special district elections. And you can argue justifiably so. If you have a special district and you're floating a bond that only property owners will pay for, then it would make sense that only property owners in the district vote on the bond. But as for general elections, like the election for governor or for Congress or for president, I think a state would have a lot of trouble maintaining a property restriction against constitutional challenge today.
Rob, I wish we had time to get another call in. Kevin, I'm so sorry. We're just out of time. We have about a minute left, Rob. So tell us what you'll be working on and between now and our next visit.
Well, I'll be continuing to work on Montana bills for the next legislative session beginning in January. I'll be doing that at least through most of December. And then, of course, for people who want to access my writings, including the writings that I publish in places like Law or Liberty, they can always do that at the Independence Institute website. That's independenceinstitute.org, Independence Institute, all one word, .org. And then, of course, my book is The Original Constitution, What It Actually Said and Meant, available at barnesandnoble.com or at amazon.com.
Rob, as always, you hit it out of the park. Thank you so much, sir. Have a wonderful day to you and your family.
Thank you, Peter. You did a great job engineering this program by yourself.
Thank you so much. And I only broke one fingernail. All right, thanks for the call, Rob. Have a great day, everybody. Global Hotspots tomorrow.